Hello and welcome to episode 204 of the Ego Chall Podcast. My name is Preston Byers, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Justin Binkowski. And on today's episode, we have a very sudden, massive retirement in the Call of Duty League, which is also coming back this week. And we are definitely going to be talking about the matches that are coming up after a 3 or 4 week layoff in the CDL. And we also have some potential challengers player coming up to the CDL and making his CDL debut maybe pretty soon. That remains to be seen. But before we get to any of that, how are you doing, Bink?
Yeah, doing all right. Like you said, a little bit of a beefier episode here than we were anticipating potentially because we were most likely just planning on previewing this weekend's matches, which will be the first official CDL matches of 2026. But now we got even more to talk about, so not going to waste any time. We can hop right in.
Yeah, so yesterday, January 6th, at 1 p.m. Eastern, Slasher announced his retirement on Twitter. He said, quote, "Call of Duty community, over the holiday break, I've made one of the toughest decisions I've ever had to make. I'm officially retiring from competitive Call of Duty. Due to the timing of my decision, I didn't have a chance to make a video going in depth with my reasons, so I figured it would be best to write something so you hopefully hear it from me first. I love the game, and anyone who knows me truly understands I live for the competition. I also always strived to be the hardest worker in the room, as it fueled my confidence knowing I was more prepared than my opponent. However, as of late, the game in the current CDL format doesn't inspire the same level of excitement I once had for playing competitive COD. I would love to stay involved in the community in some way, but as of right now, I have no idea what the future holds." He thanked his teammates, the competitors, fans, and his family and friends. So this is obviously, we just talked about Slasher at least a little bit on the last episode when we were talking about these teams, specifically in Slasher's case, Carolina, and what their wish list would be, New Year's resolutions, all that good stuff. And I think we were, specifically, I think you said for Carolina, kind of see what they have in the young guys on this team. And obviously, Slasher is not one of the young guys on that team. In fact, I believe he was the oldest CDL pro left. He's 31, 32. So he's ancient in Call of Duty terms, but still, nonetheless, this is surprising. Only 2 weeks into the season, really, because they've only played 2 weeks of matches. What were I guess your initial thoughts yesterday? Because you texted me this Twitter link.
Yeah, I wouldn't say upset is right. I was pretty and I wasn't really emotional. I was just a little upset about uh, Slasher actually retiring because he feels like he is one of the last standing uh, OG vets, if you will. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure uh, TJ and him like may have started playing around the same time, but I think like last year it was TJ, Slasher, and Attach were like the last people who competed in Ghost still actively competing in the CDL. I can't really remember now at this point, but regardless of the technicalities and whatnot, Slasher was, he's a legendary player, and I think I was watching his stream. He went live for a little bit yesterday, just shooting the shit with his chat and whatnot, and um, he did break it down pretty well. Like chat was asking him where he'd rank himself all time and stuff like that. And he was basically like, uh, he likes to do it based on eras, and he would say like the pre CWL era. We've done this before.
Mm-hmm.
When we rank guys like pre CWL era, he says he wouldn't consider himself anything too crazy. CWL era, he said he put him right at the top, and then CDL era, he's like, I got a couple wins, but nothing crazy there either. So, I think that's a pretty good and fair evaluation too. Like during the CWL era, you think about his time with LAT and just even
Rise.
before that. Well, I was gonna say like Envy is part of it, but that
Mm-hmm.
was
It
technically
was both, I
like
guess.
yeah. So regardless of how you break it down and everything, he's one of the best AR players of all time, one of the best S&D minds of all time, whether you want to give him like his flowers are not for individual S&D or credit him for like his role on Search and Destroy dominant teams like that LAG team that won in Vanguard, one of the most insane S&D streaks and championship runs ever. Like, and all his teams were known for being pretty solid at S&D. So, just a really good player. It sucks to lose him. He like he said in his tweet, and he was saying on stream, he doesn't know what the future holds, what he's going to be doing next. I hope he's around in some capacity, no matter what it is. And the one thing you're not going to hear from probably anyone else when talking about this stuff is just Slasher was one of the best pros to work with from a press or media perspective. Like, he always, very early on, I was able to DM him on Twitter and for like simple comments and stuff on roster moves and stuff. And obviously, if I was like asking for something for an actual roster move, he would never answer. But like he was really good about answering. And then I remember specifically with Champs 2018 in Columbus. There, I was planning on doing like a full interview with him because like he was on Rise, and Rise was one of the best teams, and they didn't even make it, or they lost in the first round of the winners bracket. I don't know. I remember Optic obviously wasn't there when we like the media was able to attend the event. I don't remember if Rise was, but I just remember I never got to actually talk to him during then. But then I eventually got to interview him in person when I was in Boston. I can't remember if that was during MW2. I think it was, because I think it was when FaZe won the event. So I guess I got to see him win an event in person too. So yeah, pretty cool. Awesome guy. Wishing him the best going forward. Sucks to lose him from a competitive and player standpoint, but hopefully he sticks around in some capacity.
Yeah, I mean, his prime was pretty long. Like, this wasn't a player that he was there for like a game or two and then he was kind of gone. We've seen that a lot in COD, where it's just there's a really short window where that player is very effective. But and this is weird for me because he started like actually trying to be a pro around the same time that I got involved in COD. So I remember him on his first, like, not, it wasn't a pro team because I don't think they placed top 16, but he was on Ignite back in Black Ops 2, and I remember seeing Slasher on Ignite, so that makes me feel incredibly old that he's retiring now. But he was, from basically the time that he got on FaZe in, I want to say that was AW, and then I think he might have been like early AW, and then obviously
it was the first event when Aches had the stitches in his hand.
Yeah, and then obviously when he went to Envy, that's kind of when his career really blew up. He wins the World Championship. They nearly go back to back in IW. Rise, like you said, was one of the best teams in World War II. It just didn't end on a high note. And then 100 Thieves was a really good team in BO4. The CDL is like he really kind of, the rosters did not work out in his favor. I would say like OGLA, that had a lot of talent and they were just kind of very awkward, I would say. LAT, he was not on a particularly great LAT team, if I remember correctly. LAG, they did win that major 2 of that year, and I believe Slasher might have gotten MVP of that event. It was either him or Spart, if I'm not mistaken. And then he goes to FaZe, and that was certainly his best year as a team in the CDL, even though that didn't work out in, to his liking. And then I would say Boston was definitely the low point of the CDL era. I think that's the only time that, I could be wrong, but I think that was the only time that he actually got benched in the CDL. Because I think even with LAT, he might have stuck around. So, I mean, but I literally just went from 2013 and now we're in January of 2026. Like, that's a really long time to be at or near the top, and certainly to still be in the CDL for the entire length of the CDL is pretty incredible. And I would also say, like, he probably could have went pro a little bit earlier, but he went to college, unlike a lot of COD players, and he has like a robotics degree, and so he's like a very smart guy. He seemed to be kind of setting himself up for another career if COD didn't work out, but I would say it worked out pretty well for him, and he's undoubtedly one of like the, I don't know, 15, 20 best players of all time, which is really like, that's not faint praise, especially with how many guys now have multiple world championships. But Slasher had multiple champs grand finals, multiple major or like whatever major equivalent titles under his belt. And like you said, is up there with Octane and Formal as like the best AR players to ever play Call of Duty, which is, an incredible accomplishment for him. So hoping the best, and I do hope that he sticks around because he is a very entertaining guy. He is not afraid to speak his mind, which has always been something that has got him attention, also got him maybe some unwanted attention. He is obviously the commissioner of the Slasher World League, which maybe he could be the actual CDL commissioner now, which would be really hilarious to think about. But yeah, wishing him all the best in whatever he does next. Any other stuff?
He did say on stream, somebody asked him about the robotics degree, and he's like, "Yeah, I got that 10 years ago. I don't know how much I remember, so I don't know how useful that's going to be right now." And then I thought it was funny too. On stream yesterday, he was wearing one of his not even infamous, just his famous A's hats, which over the last couple of years he hasn't been able to wear while playing because of some weird CDL rule or whatever.
Yeah.
So and there was somebody else who asked something like, "Are we gonna get was it unfiltered? I don't remember the exact word, but they were basically asking like, "Are we gonna get unfiltered Slasher now?" And Slasher's like, "I've been pretty unfiltered my whole career, so I don't know how much more unfiltered I can get, but maybe."
Yeah, I really don't know how much unfiltered. Like he and Octane, I would imagine racked up quite a few fines when the CDL was regularly doing that. But something you put in the notes is now that Slasher has retired, the oldest CDL active player is Dashy, and I mean I looked it up. I looked at his COD Wikipedia page. He's 26, so that's a crazy drop to be honest. Because Slasher, if I'm not mistaken, is 31. He might be 32, but he's in his early 30s. So now there's a 26-year-old player who's basically the unk of the CDL. That makes me feel even older because I'm older than Dashy is, and obviously you are too because you're ancient. But yeah, I mean, just a horrible set of circumstances have befallen this podcast. I can feel the gray hairs start growing out of the side of my head right now. It's just kind of crazy.
It's wild to think about. And Dashy even tweeted yesterday, just tweeted a picture of Tom Brady. Like, yeah, he's the Brady of the CDL now.
But it makes sense because we've gotten, like Clayster retired before last season. I believe he was the oldest player. Slasher around that. We talked about it when he retired, but Attach was underrated, one of the oldest players in the CDL before his retirement. Obviously, like when Crimsix and Scump and all of them retired, like that was a pretty big blow. I guess if like I'd say Fellows probably close. Like Dashy could be dethroned at some point if like a player like Fellow, for example, got called up. Because Fellows probably in his late 20s as well. So,
or you mentioned Arcides too last episode.
There are a few players who realistically could return to the CDL and be the oldest player, but as of right now, Dashy, who was born in April of '99, is literally the oldest player in the Call of Duty League. So, very interesting set of circumstances.
At least we're not to the point yet where there are no players born pre-2000, because that's when it'll really hit me.
I always get creeped out by that because like like NBA players, they have to be 19 when they go into the league or like their age 19 season. So it's 2026. So the guys getting drafted now can be born in like 2007, which is like, I feel like I really have like an existential crisis every time because I would think like 2004, I'd be like, all right, yeah. But those guys are now like 21, 22 years old. And that is just kind of crazy to me.
Well, it was last NFL draft, Tyler Shuck, the QB for the Saints. He officially is the last player to ever be born in the 1900s and get drafted. Because he was obviously, he's like 25 or something. He was older with all the COVID years and whatnot. But there's nobody else who will ever be drafted into the NFL born 1999 or earlier.
Yeah, I mean, we're certainly past the point where nobody making their CDL debut will likely be born in the 1900s like that.
Oh yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and who knows? Like I we just said like fellow and Arcides and these guys, but like there's no guarantee that any other player that is born in the 1900s will even be coming into the CDL and making their return. So, yeah, a weird thing to happen. I think like it's been a saga in a way, but as a result of Slasher's retirement, there's been stuff that's going on with Carolina. Obviously, they have to make a replacement. They have to pick up someone to replace Slasher. It seemed initially that it was going to be Nium, who is on the Chicago Huntsman Challengers team, Optics Challengers team, and it seemed like that was going to go ahead. The rumor was before Slasher officially retired, though, so I was like, I don't know who's getting replaced here. Obviously, when Slasher retires, it seems very clear, but then the reports start coming out that Nium is actually not going to Carolina. He's going to LAT, which then started a whole nother set of rumors like who's he replacing on LAT. It seemed there was actually a report out there. I don't think it was entirely correct that Nium was going to come in and replace Kenny. That does not seem to be the case. It seems now the rumors, the reports have consolidated, and it seems now that Nium is going to be joining LAT as a substitute and then potentially move into the starting roster at some point in the future. So that, and then on Carolina's side, they are reportedly signing Exceed, who was formerly a CDL pro, and so Exceed might be coming in, or he was officially announced as part of Carolina's roster. So, I don't know where you want to go first. If you want to talk about Nium or if you want to talk about Exceed in Carolina here.
I mean, I think we can lump it all in. We'll probably talk more about Exceed just while we're on Carolina, but the interesting thing, kind of like you said, it was a bit of a saga here with this stuff over a 2-day period, and I think now like the more full picture has been revealed after all this time. But Slasher initially said that he let Carolina know that he was planning on retiring like around the holidays to give them time to uh like find a replacement, and Carolina reportedly trialed Nium and Exceed, and they did scrims with both of them. So it's not like they were like completely blindsided here, but I think it sounds like from the report that they wanted to go with Nium. Nium signed the deal with Carolina, but Optic reportedly didn't sign their end of the deal to release him from his Optic contract. And when that happened, LAT swooped in, and because Optic hadn't signed their end of the deal, that allegedly reportedly allowed Nium to switch and go to LAT. So I thought that was really interesting. Like, literally, if Optic just put pen to paper, like, we're not even having this conversation, and Exceed doesn't have his way back into the CDL. But yeah, that's the way it worked out. And then because Nium switches to become LAT sub, Exceed is able to just be like that best available option since they already trialed with him. From a Carolina perspective, based on the report, I think it was Ronnie Intel's report mentioning that Exceed is using an AR now. But that's just my biggest question: is who the hell is the main AR on this Carolina team now? Like, if it is Exceed, that's something we have not seen him do in his previous CDL stints. He was always an SMG player, as far as I remember, and I don't really remember ever seeing him with an AR. Maybe in Vanguard when there were just a bunch of people using the automaton, whatever the hell that AR was called. That was sick. But yeah, it's not like, I mean, we've talked about this multiple times now over our last several episodes since the off season started. Really, is just like the number of AR options available is very slim, and seemingly Carolina is, if Exceed has been using an AR in Challengers just this entire year. Obviously, I wouldn't know that, but if that's the case, then it makes a little bit more sense. But even if that isn't the case and he's just switching to an AR for this opportunity to return to the CDL, it still leaves some question marks for me in terms of what we're gonna what we can expect from him and what we can expect from this team as a result of not having like that true uh, main AR, like a veteran main AR, not even a veteran, just somebody is like a staple main AR. Um, but this does you mentioned the wish list stuff earlier, and it ties it back into me. Like with this move, Exceed isn't exactly one of the youngest CDL prospects, and he's had other CDL opportunities, but this is like, in my eyes, Carolina now has the opportunity to just evaluate the talent it has. And maybe if things don't work out with this roster after Major One, they have the opportunity to pivot again and make another change. And that would now that it's kind of like the floodgates have opened, right? Like now that they've made this change already, like I can see anything being possible for them for the rest of the year. They just keep on trying out multiple rookie/young prospects. They could just be like, screw this year and mail it in and stick with this roster for the rest of the year, which I wouldn't like to see unless they obviously do well. So yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to see how this works out for Carolina. It's not like I knew too much about Nium beforehand, so I'm not even thinking about it from that perspective of like Nium versus Exceed. Even if they got like Fellow here, like, or Arcides, just guys we were talking about, like they still had Nero as the second AR on this team, and that's something he hadn't even done previously in his career. He was always a fast, aggressive SMG player that we've seen him in the CDL. So seemingly now the AR duo is Exceed and Nero, two guys who don't have a ton of experience running the AR. So that's a little concerning for me. But the AR in this game has felt like a bit of a do-it-all gun, so that might make things not as difficult of a transition for some players. I don't know. I'm kind of rambling here, but yeah, I'll let you go.
Yeah, I mean, he was on Next Threat Black, the Challengers team with Diamond Con, Stanley, and Ojani. Obviously, all of those guys are former CDL pros, but like you said, like the roles. I mean, maybe I haven't watched any Challengers, so maybe he looks completely different in Challengers. He's gotten 2 chances in the CDL previously, first with Minnesota back in 2020, maybe 21. I think he was actually the substitute on the first roster that Minnesota had, and I think he might have come in at some point during the season. And then he came back into the CDL a few years ago with LAG, and I don't know if that was like particularly long stint, but I've made it clear how I feel about guys that like come back into the CDL. Like it's just a very low probability of success. Neptune is by far the best outcome that we've seen in that, where a guy gets his chance, maybe even gets another chance, and then he gets a third chance. Like really, it never works out except Neptune. Obviously it's a very different situation for Carolina because I just don't think that this team has nearly as much, even like, not saying 04 was 04 and Abuza were particularly like veteran players or anything, but this Carolina team is even more inexperienced in that regard than Vancouver was last year. Like Craze has played 3 or 4 matches in the CDL. Lurks has played 3 or 4 matches in the CDL. Two matches. Nero is the vet on this team, and like you said, like he's playing out of role and something that he hasn't done. So it's a very odd situation. I don't know how much options or how many options they actually had at Carolina, because it seemed like Slasher just made this decision and was like, it's time. Like I'm not going to do this. And they had enough time to reportedly trial these players, but who knows how long those trials were. We've seen it in the past where teams have like a week or 2 to really get things prepared. Who knows if that was actually the case for Carolina in this respect. So, yeah, I hope the best for Exceed if it works out, but he's certainly not a priority for Carolina. If I'm Brian Saint, like I'm focused on guys like Lurks and Craze, and seeing what
Yeah,
we have in them versus
absolutely.
making sure that Exceed feels comfortable. Like that is kind of lower on their priority list. And also, we've talked about it ad nauseum now, but there are not very many ARs that you can just pick up. That's why the Nium thing was interesting, because Nium, if he's being targeted by LAT, presumably for the Kenny spot, that would mean that he is an AR player that they feel like they can trust in that respect. So he would fit. Again, I don't know anything about Nium like at
Yeah.
all, so I don't want to speak any more on that because I don't have anything to speak on. But just from a role perspective, that would seem to make more sense than what they're doing with Exceed. But maybe he has changed since the last time that we saw him in the CDL, and maybe he's kind of been able to be more of a flex player for even Next Threat Black.
Well, that's what I was just gonna say real quick. Was obviously I haven't seen him play at all in challengers
Yeah.
this year or that team you mentioned, but based on those four names, you would assume Diamond Con's the main AR, Standy and Ojani are running the subs, so then Exceed would be the third sub slash flex for that team. So that makes it, in my eyes at least, like I would assume he's not going in completely with no AR reps into this team, and obviously with the scrims and whatnot. Like if he was scrimming with them, he was most likely using an AR in those. And if the trial worked out well, like so, this makes sense a little bit more in that regard.
Yeah, and on the other side, we have Nium, who is reportedly joining LAT as their substitute. That is interesting. Kind
Yeah.
of, obviously, it's not the exact same situation, but with FaZe Vegas, they're
Yep.
signing Aluka as their substitute. We talked about in the last episode how that really kind of puts all those players into a pressure cooker and really puts it on a clock and says, like, hey, if you don't perform, then there is this guy, this potential phenom that we have in challengers that is ready to take your spot. And who knows what the plan is for LAT. We talked about whether they should have targeted Aluka when he was a free agent.
Yep.
Now they have Nium reportedly. That seems to be where we're heading, is Nium replacing Kenny. That was actually what Ghost of Hope tweeted on the 5th. He said, hearing that LAT are looking to make a change on their roster and replace Kenny, heard they want Nium bad and are trying to one-up Royal Ravens offer for him from Optic/Huntsman. And that was, of course, before Slasher officially retired, before Exceed was signed by Carolina. And then the reports came out that LAT are, in fact, actually trying to sign Nium. Um, it's a good choice, right? It's a good option to have. I think my wish list or my New Year's resolution for LAT
Yep.
was have a contingency plan for Kenny. And, not saying that it needs to be this week, but having someone that you can put in your roster in place of Kenny is very, very important for this team, because this is not a team like some of the LAT teams in the past, like 2-3 years ago, where you can be like, whatever, like if we don't win a championship, it's not that big of a deal. It's a really big deal if this team doesn't win a championship. And if Kenny or any other player, I should say, is the reason that you're being held back from winning a championship, then that player needs to be replaced, because this roster is much too talented, has incredible, it's probably a very expensive roster, at least reportedly it was. So all of the things kind of indicate that this is a team shooting for a championship, a world championship, not just majors at this point. And Kenny, he didn't look good last year. He has not looked very good to this point this season. Granted, it is just a few matches, but I do think that this is a step in the right direction, and most likely a step toward Kenny officially being replaced by LAT. What do you think of this move?
That's I really have just been thinking about this from a very like tinfoil hat perspective, and like you said, I don't really know much about Nium, so it's hard to evaluate it from like a talent perspective or anything like that. But just the the notion that LAT wanted to sign a substitute player after all this talk over the weeks about the potential of getting a Luca and everything like that, maybe that leads to the, you know, we know 6 teams in the CDL reached out to Rafi about Aluka, that makes it more likely that LAT was one of those teams and just lost that bidding war. Or it's possible they weren't involved in the Aluka stuff, saw the backlash, and were like, okay, we have to think about, you know, how we can approach this and potentially get a substitute. Or they weren't ever considering Aluka, and they got back to scrims from the holiday here, and they've been like, okay, scrims haven't been going well. We need a backup plan, and that's all. I have no evidence to support that or anything. That's all, like I said, tinfoil hats, conspiracy theory stuff. Um, but I think that's the most interesting element of this is we don't know exactly what's been going on with LAT to lead to this. All we know is that you know, Kenny hasn't looked great in these initial matches, and now there is apparently an option waiting, lurking in the shadows if he continues to struggle.
There's another option if they really want it, and that's Doug Censor Martin. Censor was officially, he officially parted ways with the Boston Breach, actually like an hour ago. So he's a free agent. He's available. He's versatile. He's flexible. Granted, he's played like a sub for like literally his entire career, but
playing an AR this year, I know that for a fact.
It fits.
Part of his crash out with Ben.
There's no ARs out there, and now one hits the market. I'm just saying, like I didn't even like. I don't know if you knew that he was still with Boston. I know we had like the shadow GM stuff like the last few years, but I hadn't heard anything like really recently about him, and obviously he's playing under the Next Threat banner in Challengers, so I didn't even know that he was still with Boston, but I guess he was until earlier today.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that either, but if anybody didn't see from this past weekend, Doug had a pretty hilarious crash out on stream, just going off, and it largely involved him roasting Benjay Nassim for part of it, because I guess on the podcast with Nameless and Ben said that Censor needs to retire or something like that. I don't know, and it was pretty funny. So definitely recommend. I'm sure TackRad did a video, and if not, there's definitely clips on Twitter that I've seen. Definitely go try and find some, because there was some funny stuff in there. But yeah, good luck to Censor. If Censor ends up teaming alongside a BZ, Hydra, and Scrap, I don't know what I would do. But we haven't, Censor has always said he's going to be a world champion. I mean, that might be his best shot.
Yeah. Is Hydra a national champion? No, he's not. He might be a world champion, but he's not a national champion. So, coming up tomorrow, pretty much today when you're listening to this, there will be 3 new maps in Black Ops 7. There will be Yake. Is that how you say it? Yaki.
I didn't even see that one, to be honest.
That's a new map, new 6v6 and 2v2 map. And then there are 2 older maps coming back into the game. Meltdown, which we talked about probably a few months ago now, because that had been kind of teased out by Call of Duty. A remastered Meltdown will be coming into the game. And then Fringe will be returning to Black Ops 7 as well in this Season 1 Reloaded update. So no idea about the Yake map. That who knows, but Meltdown and Fringe, both former competitive maps. Meltdown and BO2, which is very exciting that it's one of the maps that had not been previously remastered and brought back into the fold, and it was formerly an S&D map. I don't think any other maps, if I'm not mistaken.
Might have been for CTF for a little bit.
Yeah, that's true. But I think depending on how it plays, it really could be a map in all 3 game modes. Fringe was one of like the top maps in BO3. I think it should, at least an S&D map, it seems like that would work. Granted, like with the movement being what it is, and it's different. But this is probably the best game for it to come back. Like I think you said the last time we talked about it with like the wall bounce stuff.
Yeah.
That is pretty direct correlation to wall running in BO3. So what do you think about these 3 maps coming in?
Yeah, based on that trailer that Call of Duty tweeted yesterday, my initial reaction was that Meltdown in particular, it just looked a lot brighter. And obviously this is a map hasn't been remastered previously, so we haven't like seen it in modern graphics, or last time we saw it, it was 2011, 2012 graphics, right? So I thought it looked a lot better and it looked very clear and bright. So I thought that bodes well for uh, it from like an aesthetic perspective. But that, and obviously the whole fringe debacle last year with being added to uh, last year's game at a point where it wasn't able to be used competitively. Now the opposite happens here, where it's being added right away, or not right away, but with the first season 1 reloaded update. And since we know map changes will be evaluated after Major 1, these are two maps that I would very much like to see um, added to the map pool. Don't know if they will, but I am very hopeful, and I would definitely like to see that.
And yeah, because like you said, they're not reevaluating the maps until after Major 1. Major 1 ends on February 2nd, so that gives quite a bit of time to the or no, I think I'm on the 2025, not the 2026. But either way, like we have the rest of the month to kind of deal with this and look at these maps and see which ones work, which ones don't. I would like to see more maps added and not necessarily just replaced. And I've talked about that before. I think like the bigger the map pools, the more skilled these teams have to be, and maybe even more strategic in how they practice, where they have less time per map to practice on. But I personally think that is what should happen. We'll see what happens. It's actually February 1st is when Major 1 ends. So that would be
February
yeah. So
February 13th for Major 2, so that they,
yeah,
even if they don't play it now, they have at least 10 plus days to test the map after the
yeah.
Major 1 ends.
So you have a month where there's just testing that can go on, at least behind the scenes. Like the players might not be necessarily testing it, and we've seen in at least last season where the league was like, we don't really care what the players think in this regard. We think this is actually the map that we should be playing, and we're going to make the decision unilaterally. Not necessarily a popular decision among the players, but that has been something that we've seen the CDL do before, and that could be a case here. I would be really shocked if Fringe and Meltdown were not in the CDL rotation in some respect come Major 2 qualifiers. And Major 2 qualifiers, we should mention again, there are 11 matches for each team, so it's going to be a long time for those teams to kind of figure it out, and then they go to the UK for the first time in 6 years. I just think like there's a lot and I think there's going to be a lot of excitement for that major in particular because people have been kind of hyping up the European crowds and especially the UK crowd that we last saw. So I think that the CDL wants to put their best foot forward and wants to have maybe even some maps that people recognize more and remember more from years past in the CWL or MLG era. So yeah, I think I think both of them will be in. I just don't know to what extent we'll see them in the rotation. Maybe that's something Jersey Jerry was talking about. I don't know. Like that was just a really random thing to see on Twitter. Jersey Jerry, one of the owners, he works for Barstool, one of the owners of the Telluride Bush team.
0% owner.
0% owner.
That's what his Twitter bio is.
He's kind of like the face of the organization though. So he said he had an hour-long meeting with Daniel Say, which is just profoundly interesting to me. I don't like those two people being alive at the same time is just kind of unique in its own regard. But yeah, I have no idea what they could have possibly been talking about for an hour. I'm sure Jerry has a lot of thoughts, as he does with many things in the world. But I literally don't know what they could have been possibly talking about and actually like doing, I guess. Any thoughts from you about what Jersey Jerry and Daniel Say could have been cutting up about?
There have been some interactions on Twitter this year. Like there was that thing during the first Challenger Cup where like the Bush roster was seemingly getting iced by like other players playing in another tournament or whatever, and that's when it started. Like Jerry like tweeted at Daniel Say, and Daniel Say actually responded to him, and I was like, holy shit. And my favorite thing, by the way, is that all of the Barstool guys, when they talk about it, they still call him Daniel to Say, and I think that's really funny. That's just me, I guess. But when I hear it, it makes me giggle a little bit. But just the fact Daniel's like having meetings with, like, honestly, would have had no idea he even like meets with people not directly tied to the CDL and seemingly talking about the CDL. Like, maybe that, ties back in with better communication, or maybe this is just a one-off thing. I don't really know, but it does, it's interesting. Maybe they're talking about that CDL expansion we've been waiting on for 6 years, and Telluride Bush will be in the CDL for 2027. Who knows?
If Jersey Jerry is the reason that we get expansion, like I'm gonna have to have a talk with Daniel Say just by myself because that's ridiculous that he's the one that's able to get through to him. I mean, if he's paying more attention, I don't like. I really don't know what Daniel does on like a day-to-day basis. So
Yeah.
I don't flame him nearly as hard as like literally everybody else in the community. But like if he is paying attention to what's going on in challengers and trying to improve that scene, obviously the CDL needs improvement as well. But I think challengers needs like that's like the future of the CDL, and we're seeing that with Luca coming into phase, Nium reportedly coming into LAT. We've seen it many times over the years where guys start in challengers and then they make their way up to the CDL and have a very successful career. So that should be a point of focus for Daniel and the CDL ops just in general. So yeah, that conversation should have been recorded in some shape or form because I would love to see those two people interact and actually speak to each other.
Hopefully it was, and maybe it'll be a part of the next Bush owners meetings, the video series they've been doing. So who knows? Maybe you can look forward to that.
Yeah, and why is Daniel not talking to us? We need a weekly conversation with him where we just rant to him about all the things we don't like about the CDL, and I'm sure we'll become fast friends as a result of that. Only other thing was this thing you put in. I also saw this from Brian's stats. I'll just read it out. Mercury's first tournament win was alongside Dashy. Dashy's first tournament win was alongside Scump. Scump's first tournament win was alongside Aches. Hydra's first tournament win was alongside Crimsix. Crimsix's first tournament win was alongside Aches. Simp, Abizi, Hook, and Shotzzy's first tournament win was alongside Clayster. Clayster's first tournament win was alongside Aches. The family tree of champions all goes back to Aches. This just seemed like promoted bullshit that Brian Stats got paid a bag by Aches to put this on Twitter. This is ridiculous. This is glazing to the nth degree. There's no reason to put this on Twitter for him. I was stunned to see someone like voluntarily tweet out this propaganda.
No, I love it, and it reminded me, like, you see it in football the most. I think it was the Bill Parcells coaching tree was like the biggest example early NFL. The recent one is the Sean McVay for the NFL, and then obviously Nick Saban for college. So I've heard of this before from a real sports perspective, and this was just the first time like I sat back and I thought about it, and I was like, it does. Aches is just, he's that guy, and you love him or hate him. A lot of people hate him, but he's left his footprint on this scene, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, I saw Clayster had tweeted something.
Was it the tweet about Celium?
Maybe I thought Clay had seen tweeted it was like, but who taught you how to win or whatever, and I don't know who that was about. I think I lost it now, but yeah, I mean, like,
oh yeah, he replied to Aches, and he said, yeah, but who taught you how to win in Dubs headaches?
Yeah. So I mean, if you and what was it? Hitch had this thing years ago, like who's your codfather, and I love that idea, and I always wanted to do a feature on it because I do think there are a lot of guys that are not currently in the scene that have been forgot about, but like those guys were very influential in the careers of guys that we know and love now. But like Aches and Clayster, those guys have like their tentacles all over the CDL. I would say especially Clay now because he played with so many young guys like in the latter like fifth of his career, where those guys are just like flourishing. Like Shotzi, for example, is both a Clay and Crimsix disciple in some ways because he played with both of them in that Dallas Empire season. But I think most people said their godfather, if I remember correctly, was Rambo Ray at the time, which obviously makes a ton of sense because he was kind of an OG in the scene as well, and is more in line with what you think about when you talk about like coaching trees, where it's like you have this brilliant mind at the top who basically is just like sharing all the wealth of information with his underlings, and that very much seems like Rambo Ray. Aches is more like a tyrant. He does seem more like Bill Parcells, Bill Belichick, where it's like, yeah, like those guys certainly did not love playing when working with him, but the success kind of speaks for itself. So yeah, I think it's an interesting idea, and I'm sure you could. I don't know who taught Aches how to win, and Aches would probably be like, I taught myself. So that's probably where we go from there.
Yeah, so the tweet I was referencing from Clay is Clay tweeted after Slasher retired yesterday. Dashy, Nasty, and Caesar Skies, being the T3 oldest now, just doesn't feel right. Parasite responded, said, let's make a comeback when they make the game for Unks again. And Clay said, yeah, watching Cell play every day blows my mind. No wonder I couldn't make a Saturday last 2 years.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I just was looking through Clay's replies when I was looking for that tweet, and so Device got signed by 100 Thieves,
Yeah.
And then he quote tweeted, said, "Let's fucking go. Their COD team sucks though," and Clay was like, "LMAO," and I don't know, like I don't know why they said that, but I'm cool with that. Maybe Device replaces Kenny in the roster. We'll see what happens with that.
I saw Scrap replied. I don't know if Device replied to.
The Scrap replied like it's over. Like Scrap probably burn his house down.
Scrap just said, "Yeah, go f yourself." I know Hydra plays Valorant and CS, and I think Scrap plays CS with Hydra. I don't know if he plays Valorant. I know Dashy plays Valorant.
Hydra probably plays with Skies, right? Wasn't that the whole?
That was that was Valorant though. I think
okay.
So. Maybe we get a little 100T CS versus COD show match in where they mix and match the rosters. That'd be pretty good content.
Yeah, and then people complain that the COD players aren't playing COD, so that literally happens every day. Yeah, I think that does it. And we should get into these matches that we have. Of course, the CDL is back. It's been, I think, like 4 weeks since we've had any matches. It was, like the second or third week of December that the CDL went on a break. But we're back with 8 matches. You pointed this out before last week's show. Because of just the way I think they had like one more week than they usually do in this case, they made it 2 matches on Friday for the next 3 weeks, and 8 matches in total for the week. So Friday, January 9th, we have G2 Minnesota versus the Riyadh Falcons to start off. I think it's a really interesting match. I don't think that there's like a clear-cut team. I'll go with Minnesota, but I really don't know how this is going to go.
Yeah, I think this will be a good test because, like, the way I was breaking it down for Falcons, at least, was their first week. They played against 2 quote-unquote heavy hitters, top teams. Their matches after that were against 2 teams that weren't necessarily at the top, and G2's another team that's like a middle-of-the-pack squad, so this will just be another good way to evaluate where both of these teams, but especially Falcons in particular, where they stack up. I'm going with Falcons here. I think the second week was a better showing of what we can expect from Falcons as opposed to that first week. Like, as long as they're not playing against the top teams, like, Falcons should be very competitive. So I like this squad to take this one.
Yeah, Minnesota has been in a bunch of like game 5s. They lost in game 5 to Boston, won in game 5 against C9. They went to a game 4 against Optic, which, they're the best team in the world. So that kind of a win in some respect. I think it'll just be an interesting matchup. It does, like you said, show where each team is in relation to each other, which is pretty important for teams that are not like in the top 4 or 5. And Falcons is certainly trying to get there. G2, I have a lot of doubts that they'll be able to really crack that, but the preseason showed that they had some potential. Miami versus Carolina is the only other match on Friday. I'm obviously going with Miami. Who knows what's going to happen with Carolina, but we have seen the honeymoon period work out for some teams.
We have. I'm going to go with Miami too. I think this is literally like the exact scenario we were talking about with Miami, where like Carolina is now coming into this as the team with less practice as opposed to Miami when they were starting off with Trakes and his visa issues and stuff. Uh, I have no information on what Miami did over the holiday break, but I am very hopeful that they took that opportunity to get more reps in and get better. And just the improvements I saw from Miami from week 1 to week 2 before the holiday break, I think if they utilize the break to the best of their ability, then this should be a very easy win for them, unless Carolina just hits a giga honeymoon phase and somehow is a lot better than most people expect.
And we talked about it on last episode in obviously a different direction. But Carolina was the only team that only played 2 matches so far. So it does help them in that respect that they get to play 1 more match or maybe even 2 more matches than the other teams throughout the rest of these qualifiers. It gives them more practice with Exceed in this lineup. That might not necessarily help them against Miami, and I think Carolina has a pretty difficult rest of the schedule in the qualifiers anyway. But yeah, I do expect Miami to win, but Trakes has not looked great, very up and down at points, and if he's down for this series, it very well could end up being an upset win for Carolina. Saturday, January 10th, we have a banger starting off the day, Optic versus FaZe. Very different Optic versus FaZe matchups than we've seen in the past with this very different FaZe roster. Obviously, Optic, the defending world champions. I'm going to go with Optic.
Yeah.
I think it will be interesting if Optic blows the doors off of FaZe. If that starts to get people like, where's Aluka? When is he coming in?
Yep.
Really starts the countdown on this FaZe roster.
That's a great point. I'm going with Optic too. I do think, I talked about it last time on the wish list episode, just, FaZe, I believe, was 1-4 in hardpoint and 4-1 in S&D. So FaZe's path to victory here is winning a 3-2 series by taking both S&Ds and stealing a respawn. But Optic, just the way they've looked early on this year, they've even, I think it was the Minnesota series, like they lost the map 1 to hardpoint, and then Mercules took over in the S&D. So it's not like Optic have been a slouch in S&D this year or anything like that. So even if FaZe have been strong in S&D so far this year, I don't know if it's like a big enough difference between their S&D and Optic S&D early on to like cause a quote unquote upset, which is kind of crazy to just think about just because of how Optic versus FaZe has gone the last couple of years. But I'm just hopeful this is a good series, and I hope it's just not like a stomp in either direction. But if it is, like you said, that will start to raise some questions. I can already see Twitch chat being spammed with FaZe Aluka and then a bunch of question marks if that does happen. But then obviously if Optic loses ever, there's going to be some questions in there. I don't even know who they try to scapegoat this time, but it should be an exciting match nonetheless.
And Draza still has a very high win percentage against Optic and throughout his career, so maybe that'll come into play. Next up is Vancouver versus Boston. I think we're both going to go with Boston here. Vancouver making their debut with TJ, even though they have not announced that yet. So, I mean, that happened like literally a month ago, and they haven't announced it. But seemingly, TJ will be making his Vancouver debut in replace of Legend, which we didn't talk about, but Legend is now playing with a different Challengers team. So people are kind of conspiracy theorying that he just didn't want to play with the Stallions roster that he was with, and that he found his way to like a former Halo pro. So like there's stuff there that we didn't get into, but TJ coming in for Legend, this team still has a lot of question marks regardless of that. Boston has looked particularly, Boston-y so far this season, so gonna go with the Breach.
Yeah, gotta go with the Boston here. I don't expect too much of a drastic shift here from Vancouver just with the TJ pickup. This is one thing that, I guess I didn't say it for Carolina, but it's one thing I've always said: when you make a roster change, you don't want that first match to be against like an Optic, a FaZe in the past, LAT in the past and stuff. So like at least for Vancouver, this is a more winnable match than just going into a top team and then you get stomped and you don't even get to really evaluate what your new roster looks like. Obviously, you're not going to base an evaluation just on one match when you have all your scrims and everything like that, but nonetheless, this is a more winnable match for Vancouver, but just they haven't won a map yet, so I can't feel good about picking them here. But maybe the TJ and Gwyn chemistry reunion sparks a honeymoon stage for them. I don't really know. It would be a Boston loss. So,
Oh yeah.
we're both starting to pick Boston, and they lose to Vancouver, who haven't won a map yet. So I don't know. I'm going with Boston though.
And it's a really important match for Boston because that would make them 3-1 to start. It would not guarantee them a spot in the winners bracket, but really put them in a good position based on maybe even the tiebreaker to actually make it into the winners bracket. And then it would all but confirm Vancouver will be in the losers bracket, which I don't think there's a lot of doubt in that regard anyway. And then the final match on Saturday is the Paris Gentlemates versus C9. Obviously Paris, this is one of the best teams in the league versus potentially one of the worst. Paris has looked lights out, other than the FaZe match, so we think very highly of FaZe, even though they're not the same FaZe that we've been talking about. But they blew LAT out, absolutely rolled them in their last match. And that's really what I was kind of thinking about with Optic and FaZe. If Optic does something similar to FaZe, it will start basically what has happened with LAT, where people are like, well, Kenny, maybe it's time. That probably won't happen with C9 because there's not very high expectations for this team. But it is a pretty important match for both teams just to kind of get started and hopefully move toward the winners bracket. More important for C9, I would imagine, but I'm going to go with Paris here.
Yeah, going with Gentlemates. Can't convince me otherwise. No. We're both high on them. And I couldn't even try to think of a way that C9 takes this. They have to I can't even put it into words. It would be absolutely stunning if C9 won this.
Sunday, January 11th, G2 versus Carolina to start off. Gonna go with G2 here. Again, it's just a massive question mark about Carolina right now. And it really, if they had the same roster, you might be able to convince me that Carolina could beat Minnesota, even though I do think Minnesota is more talented, but still, it's, Exceed, we're really going to have to see what he can do with this team.
Yeah, I got to go with G2 too. It is, I guess, technically a revenge match for Exceed, even though
it's been a long time coming.
Yeah. And interesting to think about here is Mamba versus Craze, the two up-and-coming rookies from last year's OMET squad playing against each other in the CDL for the first time. So that's a cool narrative to keep an eye on here. But yeah, G2 is expected to be the better team at this point in the season, have shown to be the better team, and I haven't even seen anything from Carolina, so I got to go with G2.
This is, 3 rookies? Or 4 rookies in this match?
It's just Mamba, Craze, and Lurks.
Yeah, so it's probably the highest density of rookies that you could get in these matches, maybe other than Vancouver, which we'll talk about just in a minute. It's an interesting matchup. My thing is just Carolina. It's like a wait and see. We talk about this all the time when there's any roster change, unless it's you're bringing in a Luka. You might feel a little more confident in their roster change than this one for Carolina.
I just gotta say, whenever Luka comes into the CDL, if he doesn't instantly drop in 1.5 KDs, it's gonna be the sky is falling. I feel so bad for the kid.
It's kind of the same situation as Mercules, because we got to see him, and then he we didn't know if he was going to be in the CDL or for who. And then he lived up to the expectation, and it's kind of all gravy. I mean, I think I don't want to say this was the same exact scenario, but Lunars had a very big reputation coming into last season when he was picked up. People were saying he is the best rookie in challengers. He's really, really good. And then when he came into the CDL, it did not go over well. And obviously he's getting a second chance with Vancouver right now, but that's probably the worst case scenario for him. and there's way more hype about Aluka than Luder. So yeah, I agree with you. If he does not perform up to standard, it is going to be brutal for him and for FaZe. Vancouver versus Optic up next. Obviously Optic. There's this is literally undefeated #1 team versus winless 12th place team. It could change by the time that they play each other, but I think don't bet on this match. Like, this is the odds would not be in your favor regardless, because Vancouver is very unlikely to win, even though the odds would be very good. So I'm gonna go with Optic.
Yep, gotta go with Optic, but we've mentioned it enough times over these weeks, the infamous 1v12 matchup, and last year it was 1v8 in the winners bracket on LAN, so we're not quite there yet, but there have been a little bit of bad juju with the 1 seed in some of these giga upsets, but I'm not holding my breath. I will say TJ last year, this was on LAN at Major 1. I just remember him frying on Carolina against Optic when they knocked Optic off. So, it is a bit of another revenge match here, just, multiple years down the road for TJ versus Optic. But, Optic should take care of business very convincingly here.
And then one of the most, I think, consequential matches of the weekend is the final match, Toronto versus LAT. So Toronto is 2-1. They won their matches against Miami and Vancouver, which you could imagine, and then they lost Game 5 to FaZe. Yep. LAT, they won their matches against FaZe 3-0, and they also beat the Falcons 3-1, but then got absolutely curb stomped by Paris in their last match, the last time that we saw them. So they're both 2-1. They're like two of like the 6 teams that are tied for second place. But there's so much more riding for LAT on this match because of Kenny and now Nium reportedly coming in, how they lost their last match. Toronto seems to be kind of content with what they have, and rightfully so. Like they're 1 map away from a 3-0 start. I'm gonna go with Toronto. I really could see LAT winning. Like, I don't think that they're like completely out of this world bad or anything. It's just against the top teams, I think there's going to be some struggles, or at least maybe some inconsistency. And maybe that's what we see here is like, even if they're good, I think there could be still reason to have concern for LAT's future, but I'm going to go with Toronto. I just wanted to put it out there.
So I'm really excited about this match. I've been a lot higher than you on Toronto in general. And my thought process was, I thought this was going to be the only matchup that we were going to be different on. So I was going to pick Toronto, and I thought you were going to pick LAT. So now it turns out the only match that we're different on in the pick'em is the first match of the week as opposed to the last match of the week. But yeah, I'm going to go with Toronto here. I am just like choosing to believe, going back full circle to the start of the episode, like putting my tinfoil hat on and stuff. I am choosing to believe that the Nium substitute stuff didn't come out of nowhere and is out of a place of like potentially LAT being worried about their scrim performances after the holiday break. That's pure speculation. I have nothing to support that. And it just, even if there isn't anything, it's enough of like a flare or a warning signal to me that I'm like, I'm gonna go with Toronto here. I think this is a match LAT should win if everything's going right for both teams. Mm-hmm. But I'm high on this Toronto squad. I think this would be it would be a bigger win for Toronto to beat LAT than just LAT beating Toronto. I think if LAT beats Toronto here and Kenny has like an all right, like obviously if Kenny drops a 1.5 and they beat Toronto, like that's a huge deal. Like if Kenny's just doing his normal thing and LAT wins, I think this is a series like it's pretty forgettable. Not a lot of people are talking about it. But if Toronto wins, I think a lot of people are having more eyes on LAT in this situation going forward. So give me Toronto here. I guess this should be a rare instance of us getting a banger to end the week, and can't wait.
So if LAT were to get stomped again, which I don't necessarily like, obviously it's different. Paris, we think, is the second best team, like very definitively. Toronto, there's more, there's a difference of opinion. Like you have a higher opinion of them, but even then, it's like, are they like fourth? Could they move up to like third potentially, like maybe as far down as fifth or sixth. LAT though, if they lose this match and it's bad, or Kenny doesn't play well and maybe it's a close match otherwise, I think they should stick with Kenny at least another week, because I'm just looking at their schedule and they play Optic in the last match of next week. And I don't think that, like you said earlier in the show, bringing your rookie in or bringing someone in against a team like Optic is not ideal, not really what you want. I would stick with Kenny at least another week. That does give you the risk of LAT beating Optic, and then you potentially having to try to make a change for Kenny out, Nium in, and people kind of being like, why are you replacing him after being the defending world champions? I think you take that risk, and then if you were to make that move for Nium, you do it before the last week of the qualifiers, because unlike a lot of other teams, LAT plays 2 matches that week. They play against Boston and they play against Carolina. Those teams are very beatable, especially for a team like LAT. And I think that's a much better slate to bring him in. He actually gets 2 matches online, something under his belt before the major. And I think that is probably the best outcome. Obviously, other than LAT just beating both of these teams and Kenny performing up to standard and Nium not being necessary anymore to put him in, or at least like right now, he doesn't need to come into the team. So that's at least how I'm thinking about it, that they maybe wait another week before they make that change, if the change is coming. But teams have done weird stuff all the time before with the roster changes and the timing of the roster changes, and it's not worked out very well for a lot of them. So I just wanted to put that out there before we wrap the show. Pick'em so far, we're both 14-4. The last time we did a pick'em, you went 7-2. I went 8-1. Trimmer still winless. And yeah, that about does it. A little bit shorter, not like a necessarily short episode, but I think we went like an hour and 40 the last time we were here. So an hour and 10 is like a breeze in comparison. So you can like, subscribe, follow the podcast feed wherever you're listening and watching on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, as well as YouTube. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. I think we're nearing 275 subscribers there, and always appreciate the support. You can follow us on Twitter at jbink with 2Ks, at Preston Byers, and the podcast tours at Ego Chall Podcast. And next show will maybe be on Sunday, January 11th. Obviously, we will be back after the matches on Sunday, whether it be that day or earlier next week, to talk about all the matches, whatever happened in that time, and maybe some news, because we're doing this on Wednesday. There always seems to be news that comes after when we do the podcast. So maybe there'll be like a Thursday news dump, and we have to talk about whatever happens then. But we appreciate all of the support, anybody that tuned in, either on YouTube or Twitch. If you want to catch the live streams, you can watch on YouTube or twitch.tv/Ego Chall Podcast. Just follow the streams there, and it should give you a notification anytime that we're live. So if you want to tune in there. But yeah, that does it for me. Bink, take it away.
Yeah, thank you guys as always for all the support. Really appreciate it. On a personal note, I did hit affiliate on Twitch yesterday, so if any of the Ego Challers have been supporting me over there on my personal stream as well, I definitely really do appreciate it. But now we gotta get the Ego Chall channel to affiliate as well. So yeah, I'm happy CDL's back in, literally like 48 hours from right now. So looking forward to having some matches to watch there, and like Preston said, we'll be back at some point very soon to break down all the matches and talk about anything else that's happened since this recording today. So thank you guys as always for all the support. I really do appreciate it, and remember to send the chow.